Good morning, children. Let us see the another factor which enabled the globalization process faster, which is the liberalization of foreign trade and foreign investment policy. Liberalization of foreign trade and foreign investment policy. What differences? What are these liberalization policy? Let us see here. Now, one example we have studied about the import of Chinese toys to India. How the Chinese toys are imported in India. Suppose the Indian government puts a tax on the import of toys. What would happen? Those who wish to import these toys would have to pay tax on this. Suppose our Indian government put some tax on the toys which is imported in India from China. So the buyers also will have to pay the higher rate of tax here. So here, those who wish to import these toys in India, they will have to pay the taxes. Because of this tax, buyers will have to pay higher price on imported toys. We know now what is we are paying for the toys. It will not be very cheaper. It becomes very costly. Okay, so the Chinese toys will no longer be as cheap in the Indian market, and imports from China will automatically reduce. Indian toy makers will prosper. What changes here occurring here when our government makes or put a tax on the imported toys, the cost of the Chinese toys will increase. At the same time, Indian buyers will avoid buying the imported costly or expensive toys. Instead, they will prefer for the Indian toys which are cheaply available. Indian toy makers or the businessmen will prosper. They will also develop also. So, tax on imports is an example of trade barrier. Trade barrier or trade restrictions. So, what is the one important thing is tax. How much tax is higher, then the import will be reduced. The cost of goods also will be higher. Now it is called the trade barrier. Why the tax is called a trade barrier? Because some restrictions has been set up by the governments. Can also trade barriers increase or decrease? So that in order to regulate the foreign trade and decide what kind of goods and how much of each should come into our country. Here, why the government has made such kind of trade barrier? One thing, sometimes to improve the production within our country, sometimes a trade barrier or increase the tax on the imports, so that more goods will not be imported. Imports will be reduced. Indian businessmen or Indian toy makers or any other products can be improved also. Okay, so government makes such kind of restrictions in order to develop the Indian products or Indian business or Indian manufacturing goods. Okay, so that also government knows that how much more production, more goods are imported to our country from other nations, Indian business will not develop. That is one reason they make government makes some sort of restrictions or barriers on the imported goods. Indian government after independence had put such kind of barriers, such kind of restrictions to foreign trade and foreign investment. What was the reason? Because it was necessary to protect the producers within the country and from foreign competition. We know that in India after independence slowly businesses were started developing. Okay, so that in order to improve the condition of Indian producers, government had made such kind of restriction or barriers on the foreign goods importing in India. So that in 1950s or 1960s, this period just after independence, competition from imports at the stage would not be allowed these industries to come up, because if there is more restriction on the foreign imports in India, Indian industries will prosper. That was the reason during this time, during this period, government made such kind of barriers on trade. So India allowed imports only the essential items, such kind of machinery, fertilizers, petroleum, etc. these were the essential items were only imported to India. So other goods which were allowed to produce locally, so that Indian businessmen or traders and especially the producers of smaller goods manufacturers all started prospering. So here all that developed countries during the early stages of development have given the protection to domestic producers through a variety of means. We know that all developing countries or developed countries also, we know that when in the beginning after getting independence, most of the countries immediately started improving the domestic production without importing the foreign goods. They wanted to improve the domestic production, so that they made all these developed nations especially made such kind of barriers in the beginning stage soon after independence. All the developed countries, we know that almost all the countries were under colonial rule for many years. Then starting around 1991, some far-reaching changes in this type of policies occurred in India. 1991 onwards, okay, government decided that the time had come for the Indian producers to compete with the products or producers around the globe. We know that this period, 1991 onwards, the government decided to import more goods from foreign countries, so that India now is self-sufficient. India has now, Indian producers have now, it is the time for them to compete with the foreign goods, so that Indian producers can improve the quality of their goods. One thing, so that what happens, government has given permission to import more goods from other countries or any foreign goods. It felt that the competition would improve the performance of producers within the country, since they would have to improve their quality. So one reason was that they can improve, Indian producers can improve the quality of their goods. So this decision was supported by some powerful international organizations. What were the international organizations on trade? That in the coming class we are going to study about that. Okay. So thus barriers on foreign trade and foreign investment were removed to a large extent. This what kind of barriers or restrictions, putting more taxes on the foreign goods were reduced, so that goods can be imported and exported easily. Also foreign companies could set up factories and offices here. So liberalization policy is that is what we call removing the barriers or restrictions set by the government, what is known as liberalization, which means we know removal of such kind of barrier. Barrier means we have studied that trade barrier, especially tax. A high rate of tax is put on the import. It has been removed. And investment policy. Even in every country, especially our country, has permitted the foreign countries or foreign nations to invest in India for their business, for their production. So these are this type of barriers or restrictions were removed by the government, which is known as liberalization. Free trade, it made all the nations of the world has made such kind of liberalization policy, so that this foreign investment and foreign trade became very easy. This is what globalization we often say. Now we have already studied some of the world organizations also pressurized our country, especially India, to reduce this type of restrictions. So that what are the such kind of international organization which is working for the foreign trade on different nations. So that in the coming class, next class, we will study the World Trade Organization.